This podcast is a member of WildGamesProductions.com and D20Radio.com.
Hi, this is Ethan Gilsdorf, author of Fantasy Freaks and Gaming Geeks, and I am thrilled that you are listening to the Save or Die podcast.
You burst through the door. You find a small room filled with gold and jewels and a red dragon. He starts to breathe. Save or die. Like a 68 Impala. AC doesn't matter. Critical damage from my warhammer. I drove the big tin wall against every single from that cross bottom over my mighty blow. I lay 'em low, yes I lay 'em low.
Welcome to the Save or Die podcast, a podcast about classic Dungeons and Dragons.
Bring on your goblin hoes and band of oaks. Hulking zombies and kabobs. And oh no, no troll, don't slow me down, oh no. Don't dig a vicious.
Hi, DM Jim here, with a special Save or Die side adventure recorded by DM Liz at North Texas RPG Con 2016. This is the J. Eric Holmes reading and panel discussion, which was conducted by J. Eric Holmes' son, Chris Holmes, Xenopus Archives blogger Zach Howard, and Black Blade Publishing's own Alan Groh. The panel began with a live reading of one of J. Eric Holmes' fiction works from the forthcoming collection being released by Black Blade Publishing. We now join the panel discussion already in progress.
How important they were for us figuring out how to play the game.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it was so much almost more important than the rules themselves to hear how people actually did things in a dungeon.
It's true.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So the Maze of Peril is Eric's novella, and it's about, if I remember, about 55,000 words or so, and it will be the sort of the center point around which the Tales of Peril collection that we're going to publish, and that pulls together all of the Boinger and Zareth fictions into one volume. It's around which that entire book is basically built. So the other stories that are the Boinger and Zareth set are listed out among Eric's other fictions as well in the handouts on page 2. So I went ahead I went ahead and I took all this information from Zach's really wonderful essay and bibliography of Eric's works, which he has up on his blog, and it's on originally from the Dragon's Foot threads where
that's where I posted originally. Yes.
Yeah. So these include. For the Boinger and Zareth stories, the Warrior for Hire and Alarms and Excursions, and then the Wereshark story there as well, which are little episodes that sort of introduce some of the characters, and then in the case of Warrior for Hire are sort of how to introduce henchmen and hirelings into your campaign. And then Eric wrote a series of stories there prior to the Dragon Magazine ones that recount adventures from the campaign with Chris. And you wrote some of these with him and illustrated them.
I didn't write anything yet.
Oh, I thought you wrote a co-wrote some of them. Okay. All right.
No, he dashed those off, and I was like, oh, okay, let me draw something really quick.
So I think there's an illustration of the Wereshark with one of them, and
I love drawing Weresharks.
And the giant chameleon.
I can't stop.
Story.
Yeah. Partly because it's a way of dealing with the anxiety of having your character eaten when you're young and impressionable. And the more you draw your character being eaten, the more you can deal with that trauma and move on. I think I'm done drawing Weresharks now.
Wereshark.
So some of the other stories in Alarms and Excursions were The Adventure of the Giant Chameleon, The Adventure of the Lost City, parts 1 and 2. And then Eric published Maze of Peril in 1986 with Time Space. And then he started writing stories in Dragon Magazine. So Chris already referred to Troll's Head, which is the first one that appeared there back in 1979 in issue 31. And that was followed up by The Sorcerer's Jewel in issue 46. And that one had some really neat artwork by Jim Rosloff in there. And in that story, the characters need a lich. And they're
Still first level?
Well, they're probably not first level by then. They're a little bit more capable of fiction.
They have some magic to help them.
They do. And then the story I mentioned earlier that I read first in Dragon 58 is in the bag. The The book will also include an unpublished story called Witch Doctor. And then we have some nonfiction pieces in there. Chris will be writing an introduction for each of the stories, or he has written an introduction for each of the stories. And Zach has his long essay, and then the complete bibliography, which these really represent just a small portion of. We'll have that in there, and then I'll write an introduction for the book as well. So.
And the psychology to getting article.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, Confessions of a Dungeon Master, and that's actually like one of the first research activities I ever did for D&D. I went in because I had this librarian who knew about D&D when I was in school. I somehow found out about the story, probably from the Maze of Peril biography. And I went back and I tracked it down through the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature of all things. I had to look up where it was. It's like, oh, and then I got a photocopy of it from Interlibrary Loan. So, yeah, so the beginnings of some research activity for me with that.
Because Dad was a neurology professor and one of the, I guess, important people in Dungeons & Dragons on the West Coast, he got interviewed by the LA Times, and he wanted to write an article that would sort of make parents less nervous about their children playing this new weird game that seemed so obsessive and that was causing them anxiety. And I don't know how many parents read the article, but I encountered a college teacher later who had the article. I bumped into a few people who read it, and it's a fun article. It's not very deeply, incisively, psychologically astounding. It's basically the same things that Tim Kask was telling people, and Gary Gygax was saying, your children are not going to go crazy, they're not going to go to hell, and they're not going to kill themselves, and should chill out. They're learning a lot of words, they're learning a little bit about math, and they're learning how to work together for a common goal, and they're socializing. So God, Dungeons & Dragons is a wonderful game, and I'm not sure that my dad ever said that outright, but he certainly was one of the many defenders of it.
Yeah, so the introduction to the Confessions of a Dungeon Master article starts out, B for law, or B for chaos. Shouting the Dungeons & Dragons challenge, my players rush into the fray with their magic warhammers. Before getting an answer, their fantasy selves may indulge in murder, pillage, arson, and rape. The Dungeon Master's world is a sort of a giant Rorschach test. So, can't go wrong with that.
That's not true, though. He never gave us a magic warhammer. He cannot be trusted.
So some of the other things we were going to show you through the slides included some of Chris's artwork in the original manuscript version sent to TSR for the basic set. And we can't show you those right now, but we'll post those online. You'll be able to
They're actually up on my blog already if you want to take a look at them.
Yeah.
I think I posted them last week.
And then inside the handout, there's some other information. There's a map that's an early version of the Eye of Araz dungeon that Eric drew for the fantasy role-playing games book that he wrote in 1980, which is sort of a very high-level overview of the hobby, including miniatures and the fantasy fiction that sort of inspired the hobby, as well as a lot of the games that were published and available at that time. It's almost like an earlier version and more introductorily written way to approach fantasy role-playing games in general. Similar to Lawrence Schick's book, Heroic Worlds, published about 10 or so
That was
15 years
one
later.
of the first books about fantasy role-playing games that was ever published.
So there's an early version of the map in there, and then the handouts also include some of the characters from Chris's games with the family. So it's got a recreation of Boinger, and then there's actual scans of Murray's character sheet, and then Xerath is on the back, and they were just on little 8.5 or little 3x5 index cards.
Yeah, I love those cards. So you'll be shocked to see that the characters have an agility and a size, because we were playing we were introduced to the Caltech Warlock rules that included those characteristics. So Dad eventually sort of drew us into learning what you guys know as the basic set, and we rolled up first level characters and played some games of Holmes Basic, I guess. but I've probably played fewer games of Holmes Basic than anyone in this room. We played sort of a bastardized version later because Advanced Dungeons & Dragons came out, and we liked a lot of the spells in it, and I liked druids, and I liked some other stuff in it. So I said, let's use these spells, but let's not use these, and let's do this, and Dad said yes to everything. So he does mention his thoughts on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons and fantasy role-playing games, and he was very much a fan of it. But he didn't, for some reason, review Call of Cthulhu in fantasy role-playing games, but I know for a fact that he was a big fan of Call of Cthulhu as well. So Metamorphosis Alpha and Call of Cthulhu and Dungeons & Dragons are our favorite games, and always will be. And they're the only games that he ran. He and I were also lucky enough to see M.A.R. Barker run a game of Empire of the Throne and see the model that his players had made. And I ran one game of Empire of the Throne with my dad as a character. So we were definitely, we loved that game as well. He pretty much loved most of the games he encountered. Maybe not Tunnels and Trolls so much, but everything else, it's all great, yes.
Did you actually use the spell points system that was from that game that your dad wanted to bring into basic?
The Warlock, yeah, we used spell points, I'm sorry. And we used a combat system that was very armor class sensitive or whatever. So we would obsess about which weapon to use against which armor class, which was a big waste of time. But the one thing I missed about the Warlock system when I had to play actual Dungeons & Dragons was I love the critical hits. And I like fumbles as well, but I think critical hits are a wonderful thing because they give you that sense that if you keep rolling, there's a chance you'll cut this dragon's head off or impale self. You never know. It gives you that real excitement that you're going to get there or you're going to die horribly, but something good's going to happen or something really bad's going to happen. I love rolling those dice.
So it seems like a good time to open up this to questions from you guys. So if you have any questions for any of us or for each other, we'd be happy to help answer or sort through them.
Let me quickly. We didn't get the photos of my fellow players.
Oh, well, that's true.
Those I think those were in the slide.
Those are in the slide. Oh,
yeah, the only ones we have are the ones on the cover.
You missed the mysterious girl player photo.
This is
you're gonna have to put those on the blog.
Yeah. This one appeared with the LA Times article in 1979. It's Holmes with a lot of his miniatures, and this is like an alternate version, I think, of the one that's in the fantasy role-playing James book.
Yeah, he got that.
You might be able to tell us something about that.
Well, the LA Times photographer famously took a picture of one of his medical students playing with him, whose name I don't know. And I was like, who's this guy? He's famous, and I'm not in this picture. And then there's just an early picture of Dad that looks pretty good. And then there's a picture of me playing my dad a Roman miniatures war game that he and I played on some terrain my brother and I made for him. I played the Picts. And my dad played the Romans, and he won. The pigs were slaughtered, and we had a great time. And my wife says that we should notice that there's empty bookshelves behind me, which she thinks is very strange.
There's a basic set on one of the shelves, though.
Yes, the basic set is there.
I thought it was obviously stayed. Shelves.
You're saying normally your dad had lots and lots.
Yeah, my dad wasn't a carpenter, but he learned how to make bookshelves, and he made a lot. And there was
he had boxes of comic books.
Three stories. Yes, there were comic books, there were toys, there was paperback, science fiction, hardcover, science fiction, fantasy, pulp magazines, little big books. Eventually, Japanese anime toys and detective fiction. Some science books, not many. A lot of history books, a bunch of junk, yeah, a bunch of loot. Okay.
Another thing that these pictures show is his gaming table that he had. This was in the basement of his house.
Yeah.
And it was painted with chalkboard paint.
Yeah.
He would draw the dungeons in chalk.
Yeah.
So he used miniatures in most of the
Yeah, he loved miniatures, and I think often he wasn't sure what the game was going to be until he bought the miniatures or the toys. Sometimes he'd bring rubber toys or plastic toys into the game too. And then I think the story started to develop as he painted the new monsters to show us.
Yeah, there's a whole chapter devoted to miniatures called Little Metal People in fantasy role-playing games. So, he was definitely a fan.
And no Dungeon Master screen. We didn't know what that was until we went to Gen Con. And they were like, well, I don't know, that's weird.
So why don't you tell them about the model dungeon that you made that you brought to Gen Con?
Okay, I had a lot of excess energy, I guess, as a young man. And, I said, we should make a three-dimensional dungeon with real scaled rooms and decor and terrain and whatever, and then we'll put lids on top of each room, and we'll make working doors. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And so it was about a 6 foot by 4 foot wooden base he made for me with balsa wood walls. And then I took it home and I textured the balsa wood walls, sometimes with a little wooden gouge, and sometimes with an X-Acto knife, and sometimes by appliquing construction paper stone. I did every different technique of making stonework and brickwork. I don't know who I was back then, but we made it. And then he said, well, let's take it to Gen Con. I'm like, well, don't you need to get permission, to bring this big thing into their convention? He's like, no, we'll just set it up somewhere. And that's what we did. We just showed up at Gen Con. No one knew who we were, and we put up a sign on the wall that said "Beginners D&D," and people came by, and he ran a game where the little doors you could move your figures to the little door and then listen at the door, and then when you got the nerve up, you could say, "We go in," and then we would pull a little cardboard lid off and show them the room with a giant spider web or whatnot in it, and it was good fun. And it still exists, but it's kind of filling up with birdseed and who knows what. Rats.
More cobwebs, that's good.
There's a few pictures of it on my blog that Chris sent to me.
So do you guys have any questions or other stuff you'd like to talk about?
I'm curious, what's the timeline on the book?
So I was hoping to have the book here for the convention, but that didn't work out. But we should probably have it ready by the end of July, I think. We have a few things we're sorting out with the printer in terms of the print run size, but we just received the signature sheets for it. So we're going to do it as a signed and limited edition in the first print, and then it'll be a regular trade hardcover after that. And our intention is to experiment with getting it out on Amazon and such as well, since it's a regular book of fiction and whatnot, not just through regular gaming outlets.
Will we be able to pre-order?
If we get it up on Amazon, I would assume so, yes. If not, then you'll have to wait till we have it available. But yeah, we'll have some more information and be able to spread that through the forums as we get the final details of that nailed down. And certainly Zach will be able to share information in his blog or something like that too. Sure.
And it has some new drawings in it.
Cool. Yeah, so Chris wrote an introduction for each of the stories, and then he's got one illustration for each of the stories, I believe, as well.
Yeah, one new illustration.
Yeah.
Were sharks?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I did a good weird shark this time. Yes.
I believe your dad wrote one article comparing his version of Basic D&D to the Volpe version that came out afterward.
He wrote a review of the Volpe.
Did he have a view of the Mensa version or any other versions that came out that were not published?
Not that I know of. I didn't actually know there were so many versions. I thought everyone was playing a D&D, and then I realized that there were all these really expensive Dungeons and Dragons books with colored illustrations in them, and so I knew there was something else. But I really lost track of the history of basic D&D and so forth. I didn't know who Frank Menser was last year, but his name rang a bell, and so I signed up for his game, and then it turned out that it was a great political move for me to go play Frank Menser, and he had me sign his copy of of basic, which is sort of a silly thing to do, but I was very moved. And so, it's all good. It's all good stuff. And Dad's review of Mole Bay Cook was very favorable, I thought. Yeah.
All right, well, if you guys don't have any other questions, thank you so much for coming, and have fun gaming the rest of the day.
I know you're all probably very smart, creative people because you're here, and I have a sense for this. So I think one of the great things that Dad did was he did not give up his day job, but he did follow his dreams at the same time. And if he had quit teaching and tried to make his living as a writer, he probably would not have been as happy, and his family certainly would not have been as happy. So if some of you are teachers or whatever you do it, do your job and do it well, be good people, and try to be creative people too, but don't say, I want to be an artist or a writer or a game designer. I'm going to give it all up and concentrate on my art. No, you can do both. Do both. You'll be all right. That's my lesson to young people. Here's one young person. Keep your day job. Thank you.
Yes, I